That vote came from Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee is here.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Democrat of California.
This weekend, Washington, D.C. has hosted the 45th Annual Legislative Conference of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Congresswoman, I've been impressed at the CBC over the course of this weekend really taking up Black Lives Matter, not in a, oh, aren't they cute kind of way, but like actively engaging, and at a time when the discourse on the right has shifted to Black Lives Matter are terrorists who shouldn't be taken seriously.
Well, first of all, Black Lives Matter is a movement that we all must listen to and connect with. Once again, I'm proud of my district, Oakland, California, where we have so many young leaders in the Black Lives Movement. Secondly, the Black Lives Movement has evolved into a really political movement that's challenging candidates on public policy issues which have to do with institutional and systemic biases and racism. And it's so important that young people continue this movement, and the push, of course, has to be from a democratic movement from the outside. I mean, that's how democracy works. That's what we're witnessing.
Great to see you. So you invited the Attorney General to come, and you said you're very excited to tell him your ideas about change. What are some of those ideas?
Sure. Well, first, the Attorney General, and I'm really pleased and excited that he accepted our invitation to come. He only is conducting these sessions in Memphis, Atlanta, Cleveland, and Oakland. And, of course, we have a lot of ideas.
Okay.
And I think it's important to recognize the history of this district in Oakland and the East Bay in terms of the issue around police mistrust, around criminal justice reform, around police misconduct, but also the point that the community and young people have really fought for years for change, for systemic criminal justice reform. When you look at racial profiling, when you look at grand jury reform, I'm a member of the Congressional Black Caucus Ferguson Task Force, and so many of the ideas that we're going to hear from the community, that the Attorney General is going to hear, will be taken back to Washington, D.C. and translated into policies and into legislation.
So, you know, Black lives do matter. It looks like in many instances Black lives don't matter. I think it's very important to recognize that the federal government issued data very recently showing that African American men were shot 21 more times than white men.
Today is National Youth HIV and AIDS Awareness Day, and to celebrate, Congresswoman Barbara Lee has sent a special message exclusively on the HIV Video Minute.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee, co-chair of the Congressional HIV/AIDS Caucus. Young people account for 25% of new HIV cases, and too many do not know their status. On this National Youth HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, take your health in your hands. Get tested. Know your status. Get care. Together, we can realize the promise of an AIDS-free generation.
I think it's important to recognize that this 50-year policy has failed. It has not accomplished what previous administrations had wanted it to accomplish. And now, with the beginning of normal relations, the American people will be able to have the right to travel to Cuba to see for themselves what they want to see. They'll have a chance to engage in exchanges, scientific exchanges, medical exchanges, and really be free to travel.
I'm very encouraged. I've been really advocating for normalizing relations since 1977. Been there over 20 times, and it's very important that Americans understand that this is in America's best interest, it's in our best interest, and of course the people of Cuba deserve to have interactions with Americans. Americans deserve the right to travel to Cuba. We need normal relations. We need to end the embargo. We can create jobs by having trade with Cuba.
All right.
It's unfortunate that the resolution that I voted against really does allow for a state of perpetual war without, and I think this is critically important, without any president coming back to Congress. That 2001 resolution served as the basis for the 2002 resolution, which was the resolution to authorize the use of force against Iraq. And here we are again now engaged in military action without repealing, actually, that first resolution. And so I'm worried frankly, that the 2001 policy is going to stay in place until we repeal it, and that it will set the stage for the continuation of military operations throughout the world, really, without congressional input, debate, or authorities.
So 420 yes votes and 1 no. It was not unanimous in the House. The tally was 420 to 1. One solitary vote against going to war. That vote came from Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California, who went to the floor that day to explain why she stood alone.
We always need to recognize that a military solution is not the only option and give equal weight to other options and alternatives at that time. But going back to your
Let me stop you there for 1 second. Does Washington do that? Like, is the conversation on Capitol Hill any more or any less dominated by military solutions now than it was 12 years ago?
I think we're building that type of critical mass on Capitol Hill. When you look at members of Congress in the Progressive Caucus, the Tri-Caucus, the Black Caucus, the Democratic Caucus, I'd say, and when you look at the vote as it relates to the resolution authorizing the use of force against Iraq, you will see, believe it was 132 or 133 members of Congress, mostly Democrats, who voted against that authorization. But
now lay out what this legislation would do.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me just say women around the country and men have said enough is enough. And what this legislation basically would do is remove the barriers and the bans on funding for reproductive health care, all the reproductive health care options which women with money have, which includes abortions. And so finally we have, and I'm so pleased we had 70 co-sponsors who introduced this bill along with myself to just say basically enough is enough. We want equity. You know, the American people, regardless of their personal views on abortions, they believe that all women, regardless of their income, should be allowed the full range of reproductive options. And so what
progressives have had for many, many years a very clear agenda that really, I must say, is a mainstream American agenda. When we fight for a living wage, when we see people who are living below the poverty line, who are working, living below the poverty line, that's just downright wrong. Progressives want not only an increase in the minimum wage, but a living wage. Also, when you look at education, when you look at making education affordable for everyone from preschool all the way through either community college or college. We have so many gaps there and inequities that we need to begin to close these gaps. Progressives will always do for that. Also tax reform. We have a very unfair tax system, Reverend Al, and it's about time we insist that corporations and CEOs pay their fair share.